Good to go. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you.
Yes.
Yep.
I will call to order this Wednesday, April 20th, 2022, Board of Lawrence County Board of Elections. Chris, please call the roll.
Commissioner Spillvogel?
Here.
Commissioner Vogel?
Here.
Commissioner Boyd?
Here. We do have a quorum. For public comment, before we get started here, I would note that if you do have public comment, I'm sure everybody knows this is the Board of Elections, which is distinct and separate from the Board of Commissioners, the Board of the Prison Board, the Salary Board, et cetera. So any issues that you bring before this board, we ask that they be related to the administration of elections in Lawrence County. We would also ask respectfully if you would be able to keep your comments to roughly 5 minutes in time. We generally do try to, if you have questions or anything like that, we generally are pretty liberal with that policy in terms of answering and corresponding. But with that being said, we'll take anybody that has public comment. A show of hands. Who wants to speak? The other thing I'll mention is for the purpose of recording the minutes, if anybody does have business or want to bring business before the board, if they'd be able to come and speak into that microphone, just because that picks that up, that we have official record of it, et cetera. Yeah, oh yeah. It's not going to project, it's recording.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What's your name, ma'am?
My name's Linda Morrison.
Okay. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm here this morning as a representative for the League of Women Voters.
Sure.
And this is the League of Women Voters position on the drop-off situation. Casting a ballot is a process that must be accessible and secure for all voters. Our elections are fair, safe, and accurate, but sham reviews and partisan games are increasingly making it more difficult for voters, especially youth, folks with disabilities, and people of color, to cast their ballots. Drop boxes have been shown to be a quick and safe way to vote. Some voters are physically unable to put their ballots in the mail themselves or travel to their polling place due to a disability which leaves these voters without options. The League of Women Voters opposes tactics like the elimination of drop boxes that make voting less accessible and will continue to stand up for voters and fight for the freedom to vote. We should be removing barriers for voting, not creating them. Voting should be encouraged, and it must be accessible. A decision to eliminate drop boxes will impact those with disabilities and mobility issues who may need a family member or a friend to help them return their ballots. The League of Women Voters advocates for measures that make voting something voters feel empowered and informed to do. So I would urge you to continue with the drop boxes, and if you can, give us more. I also have, and I got an email this morning from a friend who would like me to read this if I can.
Yeah, sure.
This is from Elizabeth Bertoriano. She lives in New Wilmington. And she's also a member of the League of Women Voters. First, I have confidence in the courthouse staff that conducts the elections in Lawrence County and the way it conducts the elections and the counting of votes. Second, I believe we should make it easy for registered voters to cast their ballots as possible. That said, I support the use of drop boxes. At the minimum, there should be a drop box outside the courthouse. Other locations you might consider are outside post offices, police stations, fire departments, and municipal buildings. I am not suggesting using every one of them, but rather the type of locations you could consider for the drop boxes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
May I ask Mrs. Morrison a question if you're so willing?
Sure.
Sure.
The first statement you read, is that the position,
Mine? This one?
the League of Women Voters
Yes.
statement? Is that a position of the League of Women Voters of Lawrence County or of the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania?
Both.
They've been adopted by both the state organization and the county organization.
We have not officially adopted them, but we pretty much go by the positions of the state and the national League of Women Voters.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak for the board? Kathy?
Yeah.
How you doing today?
Fine, thank you. I don't have any prepared remarks, but I'm here to speak on behalf of many of my elderly neighbors. I live in a neighborhood with a lot of older people who find, they forget to vote. I've had the same couple call me every year and say, what do I do? It's too late to mail my ballot. And I drive them to the courthouse while they drop it off, and that's what I've done in several cases. That when there was a drop-off box in Township at the magistrate's office, it was so very convenient for these people to go over there. Some of them, a trip in the car downtown, it's daunting. You've got to go down there and park, and it's a long way down here. Well, it's real easy to park and everything. You just drive over to the little mall in the Shannon. I think also of young people who maybe are in college or working people who are not off on the hours when the courthouse is open. I would like to see drop boxes available for those people also. So I'm a fan of drop boxes.
Absolutely, thank you. Anybody else wish to, Lynn? It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be like one of those online forums, I feel like, where you've got position 1 and position 2.
Why do you think I'm adversary to what was just said? So my name is Lynn Ryan, and I represent the Republican Party of Lawrence County. I am vehemently opposed to drop boxes. For all of these people, all the reasons that were just given, how did they get their mail? If it's a mail-in ballot, why can't they mail it back the same way they received it? They don't even need to buy a stamp. So I don't know how they're receiving these mail-in ballots if they can't use the same mechanism to mail it back in once they voted. Also, mail-in or drop boxes are a mandate executive order by the governor that was enforced by a 5-2 Democratic Supreme Court. They're not a law made by the state legislature. So they are not a law, they are just a mandate or an executive order. Also, who do we contract for the video that will be placed on this drop box? Because it is a polling place, and by law, you have to give Democrats and Republicans access to a polling place. That is a law in the state of Pennsylvania. So who has the contract for these drop boxes and the videos that would be placed on them? And how do we gain access to this? There is a documentary coming out on May 1st that shows that there was cheating, or there is apparent reason to feel like there was voter fraud and they used drop boxes. There was one place in Fulton County, Georgia, that had 271 pings on the video, and yet 1,900 plus ballots were received on that 24-hour period from that box. So I do disagree that drop boxes are safe. And I'm not saying that there is anything nefarious going on in Lawrence County, but they're learning how to cheat better and better. And we have to do everything that we can to secure our election and have our constituents and our voters in our county and in our state and in our country feel like we do have a secure election. I just feel like we don't even need mail-in ballots. Why can't they use an absentee ballot? It's not an act of Congress to get an absentee ballot, but that's for another day and another argument, and hopefully this election will take care of it. But I would also like to question opening the ballots before the polls close, because if someone goes to, I don't know that it happened the last time in our county, but it has happened in the state, where people went to the polls and they were told that they had a mail-in ballot, that they had voted by mail, and they didn't. And so they have to vote by a provisional ballot. If we've already opened up our mail-in ballots before the polls close, that how do we retrieve the mail-in ballot from that person? So I would request that, and I know that it's, a hardship somewhat, or, an inconvenience, but in order to make sure that somebody's voting is secure, I hope that you would consider not opening the mail-in ballots until after, or any absentee ballot, any ballot, until after the polls close. And, I'm sorry if that does pose some type of an inconvenience to the election office, but just in a security aspect of the person who possibly could have someone trying to vote for them, that secures their vote. Because once they're open, you can't, get the horse back in the barn if you've opened the ballots. You don't know which one is respected to that envelope. So with that, yeah, I'd like to know who has the contract for the cameras and how hard it would be for us to get access of the videos.
So with regards to the cameras, the ones at the courthouse, I believe that's internal, isn't that? Sheriff's office has access to those. The ones at the magisterial districts would either be Karski or Protect, depending on the magisterial office.
And I mean, if somebody can get to the courthouse, I would think that they could get to your office. There's an elevator and an escalator. And if it's not during business hours, there's mailboxes all over this county, and just put it out to your own post, however you get your mail. I don't think that they're necessary. But that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, who's next? Tim?
Yes, sir. I'll try to make it quick. First, I'd like to congratulate the Board of Elections. I've never seen it run so smooth as they do around here.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I travel all across the state in my previous work. I'm on the State Council Machinist Political Board. I am an MMP and director for the western part of the state. These mail-in boxes, these drop boxes, is to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to vote. They need to stay in place. There were 60 cases of fraud brought through the state of Pennsylvania. There was no fraud. And if they didn't find anything, I'm pretty sure they would have said it was minimal. Voting is a right. Nobody should be prevented in any manner. I remember when my mother was living, God rest her soul, she was in a wheelchair. And if me and my brother works for a trade union, were in town, she had to wait for us. She could make it to the car, but we'd take her up in the wheelchair. If one of those boxes she could have driven with right up, I would assume, just like a mailbox, and drop it off that way. But for whatever reason, anybody has, partisan or not, this benefits everybody. Everybody has the same opportunity. That's all I got to say. Yes, sir.
For the record, could you enter your name, please?
Timothy Paul Buck.
Yep. Anybody else? Gary?
Carry on, Wilmington Township. I would also agree with Lynn Ryan's statements about the drop boxes. And I have actually already submitted a request to the county for a copy of the policies and procedures on how we would obtain video surveillance of that drop box that we have here. So I'm waiting to receive that. And I also, again, wanted to thank the county for now having a location for the election board meeting minutes. Previously, they were not being bound in a location where the public could freely come in and at any time review the election board meeting minutes. So I appreciate that change. And after the last commissioners meeting, I did go to the to view the books and have come across a couple of the prior meeting minutes, and I noticed that even this past year that a complaint had been made and that was investigated. So my comment is all complaints need to be investigated, including mine. I came to this board in 2019 with quite a bit of evidence that something was wrong with the voter roll when I ran in 2017. Not only were my comments not recorded in the meeting minutes, there was absolutely no investigation at all. So I would just remind you that all complaints should be investigated. That is your job. You might not have control over some things that the state passes down, but it is your job, it is your duty to investigate all complaints. And as I had mentioned previously, I am reviewing the voter roll for the county. We're still kind of crunching numbers on that. But I have one question about the walking list that we received recently. When the list says status and it's active, what's the time frame for that when you say active?
It's not even a time frame. It depends. If you do not, like if I send you a voter ID card in the mail and it comes back undeliverable, and I scan it in, and that'll make you inactive automatically because you didn't receive a voter card. So there's no time frame on that. Inactive, as far as a time frame, it's like if you miss a federal election, 5-year notice, then you're going to be in inactive status.
Okay,
Yes.
so it's mostly looking at a federal election.
Yes. Like, for instance, 2 federal elections you missed, we're going to send you another notice. We get no correspondence from you, we're going to cancel you.
And that's based on state law.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
But just because you're inactive does not mean you cannot go to vote.
Sure.
You just
Yeah,
so
no,
you
it's just as far as what's recorded on the voter roll.
right, exactly.
And well, like I said, one more question. I had requested a copy of the votes cast list in the 2020 election for Wilmington Township. And on that votes cast list that I received in January of 2021, there were 1,495 votes cast. The county website indicated that we had at that on November 3rd, 2020, that 1,855 voters were registered. But then I had ordered the state roll on and received a copy of it on February 3rd of 2021. And that voter roll only had 1,812. So there were 43 more registered on the county roll than on the state roll. So why would there
So that
be?
discrepancy might be due to the shore system specifically is a snapshot of voters at any given time in Orange County, right? Today it's changed probably 20 times.
It has.
And the reason is people move. People turn 18, they register to vote. People die, we take them off the rolls.
Sure.
So that list is constantly being adopted. If there were, for any reason, people moving out of Wilmington Township in that time frame, those votes that would be accounted for in the shore system anymore because the name would be removed.
So how often is the county's roll updated to the state roll?
Daily.
It's the shore system. It's so if you get the shore system it's a registry of voters. It's really not actually even intended to be, for example, measuring actual vote counts in a given election. It's just a registry of voters.
Sure.
We maintain it. State looks at it. So the state's shore system is the same as our shore system. But if you're getting records from the county at one time and records from the state, which are effectively the same records, at another time, those are going to be different records. Because again, today alone, we probably
So fluid.
we
That's
changed
very, very fluid.
we changed voter
I ran a report
registration.
this morning, and by the time I ran another one a couple hours later, it went down by 15 voters or so. Because
For the whole county?
yeah, because Becky was canceling DOH deaths,
Gotcha.
things happen.
Yeah.
The only reason, there's only 10 days difference.
Right there in 20 minutes, you had 15.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like, well, that's just my little township, which generally only has about 1,700, 1,800 voters. So I think, well, that's seems like a lot. I just don't understand how the system works, so thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Technology is a good and a bad thing.
Yes,
You know,
it is.
it's good because everything is updated so quickly. It's bad because sometimes you don't have everybody catching up at the same time. I mean, if it's somebody that changes online, it's pretty much effectively immediately. If it's someone that mails a change in, you have 2 or 3 days. If they don't get to it as quickly as they do,
Right.
there you have a discrepancy that's
Yes.
there. And then if they go in, like my daughter did, and mail something in and then go change something, so by the time those things get caught up with each other, it does all come out in the wash because it is one list, but it can change so very, very quickly.
And the other thing to mention on that too, is human entry.
It's correct.
You know,
Yes.
there's no automated entry into that system. And so, you know, to that end, there's gonna be just lag time on the virtue of that. And to that end, you know, very rarely, because our people are, you know, they do their jobs diligently, but very rarely, you know, you might accidentally, if it's, you know, his middle name initial, right? It might be a T accidentally instead of a V,
Gotcha.
right? Those things do happen.
Sure.
But yeah, by and large, I can tell you, we're very diligent. The office is very diligent. And making sure that voter roll is as accurate as possible, given both technology constraints and the laws of Pennsylvania.
Just a technical question for the director. You said in your response, DOH. Can you clarify what DOH means?
Department of Health.
And can you clarify that process?
They
What does
send us,
DOH do?
they send us like, well, let's, for instance, the Amish. They don't have obituaries in the paper, but they will have a death certificate. And so that comes to us, and that's one of the ways that we look at canceling anybody that passed.
From the state
Yes.
Department of Health?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Since you brought up the honors, I just want to make one more comment, because I still am in the process of reviewing the voter roll and looking at disparities. And there is, the majority of the disparities in Wilmington Township is the Amish. And I realize that must be very difficult to maintain because they do move quite a bit. There's a lot of filers, non-filers, and so it's hard to track. But I am really digging into that because there's a big disparity.
Do me a favor, define this, what do you mean by disparity?
As far as names that were listed as having voted in the 2020 election and names that are listed on the state voter roll, there's obviously a lot more on the state voter roll than on the votes cast list because not everybody voted. But then there's also quite a few that voted that were not on the voter roll at all. So just trying to figure it out, you know, there's a lot to flesh out, and there could be a lot of reasons for why that is happening.
And again, if it's something specific to the Amish community, I mean, if, you know, if you scoured the voter list and you want to show us something that maybe we could be doing better in the Amish community, I welcome the
My
opportunity.
plan is, and we have a team that we're collecting of people who intend to canvass the county. We're still waiting on some data analysis to figure out what areas to target. And I don't know really that target is going to be in Wilmington Township. I just am familiar with the voter roll, so I was looking at that one myself.
I will say with regards to any canvassing done by you know, individuals who are acting effectively in a private capacity, people, there's a tendency to at times not tell the truth when people are asked directly about their voting record. I'll give you an anecdote to that. We had an individual call up to the Board of Commissioners office at one point. He was mad that he didn't get a contract for the county. And I was talking to him. And at one point he goes, you know, I voted for all 3 of you.
We thanked him.
Appreciate it. Can't legally vote for all 3 of us. So I didn't say anything, but you know, you want to look at me and say, hey, buddy, you just, there are 1 or 2 things here. 1, you're lying, or 2, you committed voter fraud.
Well, and the vote, when you canvass, you're not asking how people voted. You're just simply asking if they voted.
Well, but
They can
even,
lie about that as well.
and people lie about that constantly. You know,
Of course, we're asking for affidavits, so I mean, that would hopefully deter people from lying about anything. If they're gonna have a sworn affidavit.
I doubt if you'll even get, well, I won't say that.
But
Yeah, I'll see what
An
happens.
affidavit,
can I make one point though? When ballots come into us, as far as mail-in ballots, we have to scan them in so that you get the credit for voting. And then we compare how many ballots to how many people were what we call banked in, but we scan them. So we have to have that even. It has to even out, just like a checkbook. So we do that, and that's one part of the election. The next part of the election is when you go and vote at the polls and you sign the poll book. When those poll books come back, we scan them as well to give you the credit of voting. And then we do the same comparison. How many voters were at the poll? How many got banked? If it didn't work out, then we go back and we go through the book. Yes, were there mistakes? Yeah, but we find them
Right.
through the comparison. So we're always doing a check and balance throughout the election, all through the election. And even at the end of the election, we have to do a 2% audit where I will look at the highest vote count throughout the county, and I will take it, I will rescan it, and then I hand count it. And it always matches. So I've never had any discrepancies in an election. And as far as I know, Mr. Allison never did either. So I'm just following what Ed showed me to do throughout the years, and it works, and that's how we do it.
Actually, I'll give another anecdote to that. You know, the last election before we, by just human error, we counted I want to say the mail-in ballots that went into one of the precincts accidentally 2 times.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
We do our audits, we go back and we check everything over, that mistake was found, and that was corrected. So, we're constantly, when we're in the process of election, reviewing all of that to make sure everything lines up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, 10 seconds.
Sure.
My name is Lisa Stern.
Okay.
And I would ask you I'm in favor of drop boxes. And I think that voting is a right and a foundation of our democracy. And it should be made more convenient and easier for everybody to vote. Everyone else has pretty much said in detail, but I just wanted to make my voice heard today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll move on to the election director's report. Tim, what do you have? Oh, there we go. Minutes from February 1, 2022 and March 29, 2022. And again, I'll give my colleagues a minute to check that over and take a motion to accept the file or make any changes as necessary and expedient.
I will move that both sets of minutes be placed into the.
The only question I have is what's the resolution number on 22 dash? If you look up March
Oh,
29.
changing the polling.
Yeah,
I'll get it for you.
yeah, we'll just add that to it. I think we'll be in good shape. Let somebody see something like that.
While they're doing that, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I gotta test your memory.
Okay.
The minutes from February 1 are showing that you're not listed. I realize that's a number of months ago. Do you recall, perhaps were you off that day? I just want to make certain that just in case you were there, that the minutes would reflect it. I honestly can't remember.
Well, I'll tell you this too. It says moved by Mr. Vogler, seconded by Mr. Boyd to accept and file minutes. Motion carries 3 out.
Oh, it carries 3 up,
Which implies that,
so maybe you were there. Again, that's a number of months back.
let's table these again and go back in and review and see what the case was there. Because you've got one saying 3-0. You've got, let's do that for at least the February 1st ones.
I would agree with you.
And then the March 29th ones, again, what's the resolution number, Chris?
It is, that was 04.
That was the changing of the polling place in the 5th ward, am I correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
With regards to the March 29th minutes, any other changes need to be made?
Let's see. looking at the February 1st, I can't,
Look at the video.
Sorry to put you on the spot,
no,
but obviously we wanted to accurately reflect who was and wasn't here.
We gotta check the commissioner's poll book. See if you
there
got your signature in there.
That's it.
That's no big deal. Now, that's interesting. And you noted.
Well, the
Commissioner-
second one under new business,
Yeah,
it
it
says
says
2-0.
2-0.
I want to say I was not there.
You weren't.
I
That
was not
my-
there.
My
Mhm.
clerical error,
So the-
it should have been 2-0.
Right,
Where it
Yeah.
says the.
Review
Yeah.
further.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's very often, Loretta.
No,
Were you at CCAP? You might have been at the CCAP conference, now I'm thinking about it.
I was, because I was there on the 28th,
Yep, there it is.
January.
There it is. You were in, because was that new officers
Yes.
training? There it is.
Thank you. Very good.
We'll make that 2-0 then,
Okay, we're good there.
and call it a day on those minutes. I will take, unless again there's anything else, I'll take a motion
Okay,
to approve both February 1 with the 2-0 change and the March 29 with 0-4 added to the resolution. I'll take a motion to approve those minutes.
I will motion to approve.
Second. Motion and second, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, question on the motion, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign, motion carries. Tim, now elections director report.
Okay.
All right.
Well, we're talking about drop boxes. So as of right now, or I should say as of yesterday, we had 3,905 applications in for mail-in ballots. We started mailing out ballots Monday. So we've got a lot out for one now. Let's see, last year, we had one drop box upstairs by the entryway. I had a total of 284 ballots that were dropped there out of 4,284 ballots that came back. So I mean, I don't know if that number is gonna, but that's what I had. Presidential, I didn't even go to. That was the only time we had drop boxes all around. Yeah. That was an incredible record-breaking election. So I didn't use any numbers from that. I don't have a problem with drop boxes anywhere. But as far as this election goes, since it's smaller, one upstairs to me is sufficient, but I'll let the board decide on that. If you have any other questions about it, let me know and I'll answer whatever I can. But we will need a drop box. Four of them, sometimes I feel that 4 of them around the county, it's not fair to the rest of the county. I mean, if I was gonna do drop boxes, I would have drop boxes everywhere in the municipality. Like have one in Shenango, one in Plain Grove, one in Volant. I mean, it's only fair that way. But then we're talking an extraordinary expense and an extraordinary staff time as well. But that's just my outlook on things. So I think we should have a drop box upstairs though. But I'll leave it up to the board as that, how you guys feel. Any questions you need to ask me, let me know.
Sure. Before we jump on to the greater Dropbox conversation, before we're still in elections directors report, do you have anything else?
Oh, well, I have just some dates to remind. Well, first of all, let me say that we did our LNA test, which is a logic and accuracy test. I ran 3,675 ballots. Out of all that, it was 100% accurate.
That's through machines.
Yeah, both my central counters and over at the church where I had the precinct scanners, I did the exact same test on both. They both matched. They were 100%. And I also took the time to test the ADA machines. Mind you, the ADA machines do not tally votes. It is only a marking device. They marked properly as everybody voted, and they scanned through the scanners as well with no problem. So that was very successful. We also have some reminder dates that the 2nd of May is the last day to register. The 10th of May is the last day for mail-in absentee apps to come into the office. We will be open till 5 to accept those applications. And I will have a public test on the 13th of May, about 10 a.m. And I will have one precinct of marked ballots that I use for the LNA test. I'll run them down on the central scanners, and I'll have a precinct scanner here as well to run them through. We can compare results for the public and for that.
Will you clarify something for me
Yes,
about
sir.
what you just said? When you said marked ballots, these
Yes.
are sample ballots,
Yes,
are
sir.
they not? They are
They're
not
marked
official?
No,
They
they're marked
say
test on the
test.
top.
Okay.
Yeah, they're computer generated. Just to go into it, I generate ballots that mark in 5s. So when I look at the results, the pattern works. So it's voted by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the pattern starts over. And then if I look at it in a whole for the whole county, there's also a reminiscence of a pattern.
And that process, by law, correct me if I'm wrong, you have to legally advertise that you're going to be doing it, and the public is able to view that. Am I correct?
I did not advertise it. I don't believe that we've done that before.
No, wait, now, this is the
The public test.
The public test I will.
Yes,
Oh, I'm
yes.
sorry. I'm
Is that,
sorry.
that's what I assumed
That's
you were
what I
referring
was
to. Yes,
referring
that's
to.
advertised.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
That's the LNA test. No, the public test, yes, will be in advertised. And
open to the public.
yes, sir. And it is by law to do that.
Thank you. Actually, we'll just do the drop boxes first, then we'll, if you guys have any questions for Tim or comments, we'll go to those next.
Sure.
So with drop boxes, I'm good with one out at the front of the courthouse. I'll defer to Commissioner Spielvogel because my comments might be a little lengthy. Since we asked you to stay to 5 minutes, I'll try to stay to 5 minutes. But I'll defer to Loretta.
All things being said, I agree with the fact that the election should be open to everyone and there should not be any type of reason that a person should not have access to being able to vote. And that includes drop boxes. And to our knowledge here in Lawrence County, we've had no problems with our drop boxes. We've had them in the magistrate's offices. They're available at those places. They are under watch. They are under video surveillance. They are there inside the buildings. I would be in favor of having the same ones out that we had with the presidential election.
Thank you. And please indulge me. 'Cause I think it's safe to say that we've all put a lot of thought into this issue. As some of you may know, a while back, I was nominated by the governor and confirmed by the Pennsylvania State Senate to serve as a member of the Pennsylvania Election Law Advisory Board. It is a 23-member board comprised of residents from throughout the Commonwealth. All of our meetings so far have been by Zoom, primarily, of course, due to the restrictions that COVID placed on so many of us. The board has not met all that frequently, but more recently, some of their activities have picked up. In fact, what the board decided to do was to create 5 working committees, of which I served on 2. The first committee is dealt with matters involving election officials and workers. I was a member of that committee. The second committee dealt with voter registration. The third, and I was a member of that one as well. The third dealt with obtaining mail-in ballots. The fourth, processing of mail-in ballots. And the fifth, in-person voting. Those were the 5 committees. The full board met on March 25 and began considering the reports of each of those committees. We got partway through. It was a 2-hour meeting. And we agreed to reconvene on May 26th to continue the process of reviewing the reports and recommendations of these 5 committees. I want to call to everybody's attention the report that was made by Work Group 4, which dealt with the processing of mail-in ballots. And they put together a pretty lengthy report as it relates to drop boxes. I'll read part of it if you don't mind. Again, this is from the subcommittee or the committee that dealt with this issue. One of the gray areas left unaddressed by Act 77 was how voters are to return their mail-in ballots. During the 2020 presidential election, then Pennsylvania Secretary of State Bukvar interpreted the provision in the election code which requires that ballots be delivered in person to the County Board of Elections. And her interpretation was that that would permit counties to decide whether they would accept ballots delivered to places other than the County Board of Election, such as a satellite location or a drop box. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court agreed with this interpretation in a lawsuit that was brought by the state Democratic Party in an effort to clarify aspects of the election code prior to the 2020 election. I think this sentence is very important. Currently, there is no statute or regulation governing drop boxes. The guidance that was issued by the Secretary of State on the eve of the November 2020 presidential election remains in place and may still be followed by some counties. Again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read the entire matter, but I think it's worth noting that even with Act 77, which is the law under which we find ourselves, the word drop box is never used. It's silent as it relates to drop boxes. But again, we do have a court ruling, as noted, that agreed with the interpretation of the then Secretary of State. I just wanted to enter that fact into the record. I've got 2 concerns as it relates to drop boxes. I guess I'd be much, much more comfortable if there was something in the election code, which is the rule book that we have to follow. And we say this many times. The 3 of us don't make the rules governing elections. Those come out of Harrisburg. We have to adhere to those rules. I guess I would have a much greater comfort level if there was some language in the law that specified the role of a drop box. But the law itself is silent. What we're looking at, again, is an advisory recommendation of the Secretary of State, or Secretary of the Commonwealth, if you will, that was then reinforced by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. That all being said, it leaves me with 2 other concerns. And I think one of the persons who presented testimony this morning may have touched on it, or maybe it was actually Tim. 2 years ago in the 2020 election, this board on a 2-to-1 vote voted to implement drop boxes. I was the negative vote. And if I recall correctly, we put the one upstairs. We had one at Judge Russo's office, Judge Nicholson's office, and Judge Cartwright's office. So that would be Neshannock Township, North Beaver Township, and the Borough of Elwood City. Right. One of the reasons I voted no at that time was I believe, and I still believe, that by doing that, it creates an unlevel playing field for voters. A voter living, let's say, in North Beaver Township is given somewhat of an advantage in terms of their proximity to that drop box at Judge Nicholson's office on State Route 18. That a voter in Plain Grove Township then does not have that advantage from the standpoint of accessibility in terms of how long it takes for you to get to that particular drop box. And as Mr. Germaini said, in an ideal world, you would have one perhaps at every municipality to create that level playing field. But the fact that as we did in 2020, that we only had 4 of them. And yes, you could make the argument that you had one in the northern part, you had one in the central part, you had one in the southern part. I can accept that. But if you break it down, again, I would argue that it did create an unlevel playing field for the voters in terms of their ability to get to those drop boxes. The second concern I'll note is that, and I'll say this with no disrespect to either the two of you or even myself. We've actually been a little inconsistent in terms of the fact that in 2020, the presidential election, we had 4 drop boxes. In 2021, I believe we did have the one upstairs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we went from 4 to 1. And Commissioner Spielvogel has proposed that we go back to the 4. But we've been inconsistent, and it almost sends a message that, well, drop boxes are only important in certain elections, but not all elections. And so I wish that perhaps we would have been more consistent. And I realize we're only talking 2 years, 2.5 years, but there is that inconsistency that we went from 4 in 2020 to 1 in 2021. And now today we're contemplating whether to go with 1 or with 4. I also think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the reasons for the placement of the drop box outside the door here at the courthouse in 2020, one of the reasons, there were others, but one was COVID related. We thought it would be safer for people to pull up in their car, not have to enter the building, and reduce the amount of exposure to other people by having that drop box out front. I hope my recollection is correct, that was a reason.
Well, that was also the rationale too for the other deployments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, COVID.
So for all of those reasons, I'm in agreement that we continue the one upstairs. There is a security camera, but I do have concerns, and I think I've made my concerns known as to why we should not go beyond that at this time. Now, if the legislature sees fit to amend the election code to incorporate drop boxes statutorily, and either through that law and or the regulations that come about from that law, we'll adhere to that. We'll do what we're told to do by law. But for the reasons I've listed, and I've gone over my 5 minutes, so I will stop. I hope you'll respect my reasoning. I realize this is an issue that people are very passionate about. We've heard from both sides today. I appreciate everybody's point of view, but I hope you'll take into account the reasons that we've all given today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely, thank you. And thank you for serving on that board. It's good to have
By the way, I don't get paid for being on that board.
Well, it's certainly good to have a member of our county on that board to maybe part of that conversation.
Thank you.
With that being said, I will take, it sounds like the general consensus here is 1 outside the front. And
I would like to make a motion.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we act inconsistent with our first order of drop boxes and have all of them placed, not only the one at the courthouse, but also the ones at the magistrate's office. I will make that motion.
And I can do one of 2 things. I can either second Loretta's motion, or it could die for lack of a second. But I will second your motion. It's not a guarantee I'll vote for it.
Correct.
But I will
I
second, I'll
appreciate
second your
that.
motion.
Thank you so much.
we have
Yes.
a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Dan, you brought up the Election Law Advisory Board at the state level, and it's very clear that this issue is being studied very intently by people that candidly are a hell of a lot more intelligent than at least I am. I think it's going to continue to be studied over the course of the next couple of years. I think the policies will continue to be fleshed out. I will agree, I think both of you stated we do need to have some level of consistency in and if we deploy drop boxes going into the future. So to that end, not at this board meeting, but it might be worthy to look at creating a formal drop box policy that governs, how, why, and if the county deploys drop boxes as well as to where. But again, I think it's an issue that's being studied very intently by, again, people that are a hell of a lot smarter than I am. And we'll look forward to, reviewing the final conclusions and the final report of, number one, the Election Law Advisory Board, any new laws that come out of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the General Assembly, and as Dan noted, we do our best to follow those laws, as quite frankly, none of the three of us or four of us want to end up across the street. Yeah, it's definitely a fluid topic. I stand by my original statement though for this election. I'm perfectly fine with the one inside the first set of doors of the courthouse. Although I will agree with Commissioner Spielvogel insofar as, in the ones that we deployed to the magisterial offices, there were no issues. They were utilized, and I'm glad that they were utilized. And they did provide voters with greater accessibility to be able to vote. So with that regard, I think this is a successful program. But as this issue right now is under a significant amount of scrutiny, as the General Assembly is debating it, as other bodies are debating it around the Commonwealth, I think we pump the brakes on it a little bit until such time as the General Assembly has made a final conclusion on what they want to do with it. And until such time as we see some more academic research and research relating to drop boxes out of the advisory committee and other areas. So I will say that it was a successful program in 2020.
And if I could just add just one more thing. We've discussed the presidential election, and yes, it was a larger voter turnout and a more important election. I think that the gist of, regardless of party, every election is important. And so by that nature alone, that, stepping away from, well, we should have them because we have a larger voter turnout, or we should have them because this election is more important than another. My statement would be that every election is important. We should make it more accessible for people to be able to vote rather than hindering the voting. And that's, again, all things being said, it's a topic that we'll continue to have discussion on and take a vote. And, we've had these discussions before, and we'll continue to work together and come up with solutions and do the things we need to do. But I think that because it is such a contentious thing that and I applaud everyone, because we've done the recount together, and it's just been done, very cordially, and we've had meetings and they've been very cordial. I applaud everyone here, coming here and speaking and looking for information, that we are able to do that in a very, very comfortable manner, I should say. So thank everybody, and thank the residents of Lawrence County for doing that, and both parties and the officials, because it's contentious in other places. And I think communicating and being able to understand each other's points of view is a very, very good thing. So yes, we'll continue to have discourse and we'll move forward with it. But I felt to at least make that motion to offer up that I would like to have. I was going to jokingly, when you said having them at 27 or at our different polling locations, I was going to say, so moved.
We're not doing that.
But that, we do have that ability to speak with each other and have that discourse, so.
May I clarify a couple of things, please? I stand corrected. I may have made a statement that led you to think that the drop box here at the courthouse is on the outside of the building. Thank you for both noting that it's within the first set of doors.
Yes.
I apologize if I misspoke. Secondly, I will also clarify too that this advisory board that I serve on is just that. It is an advisory board. Recommendations will be given to the Pennsylvania State Legislature. It will be up to those ladies and gentlemen to determine what steps they take, whether they pay full attention to the report, partial attention, or no attention. Our recommendations will not be binding in any way. It's simply, as the name implies, an advisory board. So just wanted to make note of that. So thank you. Thank you both.
Absolutely. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on Loretta's motion to deploy drop boxes at the courthouse and at each of our 3 magisterial districts?
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
Just so everybody knows, my office is in contact with the post office all the time. We've never had any problems with mail coming in or going out.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep that in mind, that there hasn't been any problems with that. It works very well. And they are very kind, and I thank the post office for everything they've done to help us get the ballots out and to get them in. So I've never had a problem with it. So I just wanted to state that. Okay.
So why do you need a drop off?
Well, we're gonna, if you wanna come up at the end, I'll open it up for public comment again. But yeah, right now we're gonna go through the voting. I'll take Chris, if you'd be able to call the roll.
Commissioner Spillvogel?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogler?
No?
Commissioner Boyd?
No. I'll take a motion to put one
Fine.
where it was at last election, outside of inside the front door, but outside the second door into the foyer. The foyer, the courthouse foyer.
So
A second.
Any further discussion on that? Hearing none, question motion, Chris, please call the roll.
Commissioner Spillvogel?
yes.
Commissioner Vogler?
Yes?
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes. There we go, you have your marching orders. Only other thing that I have, and then I'll turn it over to both of you if you have any other questions for Tim. I was with the treasurer the other day, Mr. Rapone, and Rich, as I'm sure you know, has a habit whenever he runs for election, he gets as many petitions as he possibly can. And he circulates the hell out of them. His stack, I think the last time was this big, and there were some that might have had one signature on it, but that's Richard's thing. There was a resolution passed in 2018 by the former Board of Elections that limited the amount of petitions that we give the candidates to 15. What I'm asking for clarification on is, and we might have to amend the original motion to do, is are we stopping it at 15, which I don't believe that we should make a full stop, hard stop at 15, or are we stopping it at 15 free petitions? And then anything additional at that point is a cost to whoever wants more of them. That actually, I'm perfectly fine with that, just because, you know, I don't like the idea of handing out 100 petitions, and taxpayers paying for that, so one candidate.
Right.
So what are our thoughts on that?
Not to muddy the waters, but, and this might be something either you or the solicitor can look into. Is it legal for a nominating petition, a blank nominating petition that has not yet been filled out, to be photocopied? Can a candidate photocopy nominating petitions? Are they legally permitted? I don't know. And maybe we need to find that out. So
My only thing on that is that this year, there were actually petitions online that you could have went to the state site that you could print yourself. So with
They've
that being
always
said,
been like that. You could always print.
I've never seen them myself, and I've never had to accept them because they were at a state level. So I don't know, but I do know that.
would we look into that?
Yeah, we will definitely look into
Let's look into that. I don't think it's gonna be, it's not gonna be an issue for this year. But if I know Richard, it's gonna be an issue.
Right.
I love the kind of
Several
that.
different things, yes, several things.
There was one other thing that you mentioned, dude, and I can't remember what it was.
All circulating in the courthouse.
Oh,
And
circulation.
I had Tim, print off that there's no circulating, it's election law.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Well,
it's election
Absolutely
law.
is.
There you go.
No politicking.
No politicking, and that's considered politicking. So that's, I think the one remaining is, we give 15.
What do you
Is
know?
there can you purchase more or print off your own?
Mhm.
And I think his concern was he didn't want to take that chance on printing them.
Right, because if it's
And-
not
and- correct,
consistent, then
right,
it's, yeah.
yeah, so,
Well, and the other thing too, the other question in there is, are we legally obligated to provide as many as anybody else?
correct,
Yes.
That's the other question.
Don't know that.
right.
Okay, we'll look into that.
So yeah, we'll reconvene here, whenever we next reconvene. And again, it's not a pressing issue, but it's an issue that we're gonna have to address. Anything from either of you with regards to election administration?
And this is more for the folks in the room. Again, appreciate your all being here today. Appreciate the interest that you show. I wish we had 10 times the number of people we have here today. But anyhow, I do want to reinforce that office is open for you to come into and talk to the staff And if you want to see how they do things, they'll show you. You could probably just walk out there and see what all's going on in preparation for the election, getting all the materials together for each of the 75 polling places that we have. I also want to note that Act 77 more than doubled the workload on our staff. Because prior to Act 77, you either voted in person or you got an absentee ballot. Or you can still do either of those. But now you've added the workload of the mail-in ballots. And not only in terms of the workload, but the cost as well. But I just make note of that. But what I want to close with is thanks for your interest. But please know that that office is open because it's the public's office. And you're welcome to go in there and ask those folks questions. And hopefully respect the fact that they do have work to do to get ready, but you're welcome to see what they do. We want it to be open for people to see what goes on. With that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Captain?
Just a reminder that the polling place changed in Newcastle 5-2. It is at the Armory. It's no longer at VOTEC. That's all I have.
Any additional questions, comments from the public?
You want me to come up there?
If you would.
Not to be a pain.
No, you're fine.
So I'm just curious, how do you get a mail-in ballot?
How do you get one? You have
How do
first,
you attain a mail-in ballot?
you have to fill out the application first, then we vet it through the system. And then once it goes through and it's approved, it's verified, then we'll send you a ballot
In the mail,
in the mail.
through the US Postal Service.
Or you can come and pick it up as well.
So they could come up here during business hours and pick it up, and they can receive it through the US Postal Service, but they can't mail it back in the same fashion?
That's up to the voter, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
But
if you have an
no.
excellent relationship with the Postal Service,
I do.
I think that the drop box is totally unnecessary, and it just puts another question into voter integrity. And I'm not saying, because you know what, I was up here, I watched every single ballot, I've tooted your horn to every meeting. I always tell people, as much fraud as there is, I feel confident that our county is one of the better counties in the state.
Okay.
But it's still an avenue that is ripe with fraud nationwide.
Well,
And people that don't think that it is need to watch Dinesh D'Souza's documentary that's gonna be broadcast May 1st. And
Okay.
tell me after they watch
Okay.
that they feel confident. And I'm not saying there's anything nefarious going on in Lawrence County, because I don't feel like there is, but to be proactive instead of reactive, I think that people need to use the US Post Service to mail their ballot back in, or, you know, I actually think we need to get rid of them, but that's for another day and another argument.
understand.
But if we don't have a problem, if they are receiving them through the US Postal Service, why can't they send them back in the same fashion? And I don't think that you are negating the accessibility to minorities or to the youth or to the elderly or to the disabled. They're still getting, I mean, how do they get their mail? Do they not get mail? You know, I think to make that argument, which has been made here today, not by you all, but I think that is disingenuous in and of itself.
Well, if this makes you feel any better, I do keep track of what comes out of the drop box. I have a complete record of that, and I did that when we had all four of them as well.
Right.
So that's how I came up with the numbers that last year there were 284 total ballots dropped through that out of 4,284 ballots. So, I mean, we keep a
But
record
do
of it.
you track how many pings, how many people have visited the box?
What do you mean?
When you all need to really start watching some of this stuff on how these other people are cheating at the drop
Well, why,
boxes.
clarify what you mean.
Okay, so there was one example in Fulton County, Georgia, where they had 271 pings, which is 271 people visited the drop box,
Okay,
but 1,974 ballots came out of that box in a 24-hour period.
I can't
And they had
speak for
video
that.
of a woman like stashing a pile in there and then taking latex gloves and walking right behind her to a garbage can and throwing.
So here's what I'll say in regards to Lawrence County. Number one, the magisterial offices were very intentionally chosen back in 2020.
Right,
So we
right,
only have the one in the front of the courthouse last year and this year, but very intentionally chosen in 2020 for two reasons. Number one, well, they're not election staff. We do have staff at those offices where, if they saw somebody coming in with a wheelbarrow full of mail-in ballots, that would get back to us. Number two is we have control. Well, we don't have direct control. We contract with companies to handle the security feeds for those. We did not receive any reports whatsoever, much less credible reports, that individuals were going into those locations and dropping off, 20, 40, 60 ballots. If a voter were to come to us and say, hey, I'm just dropping my ballot off in the magisterial district office, or if one of the workers there, and it's not necessarily their job, but they're keeping an eye out for those types of things. One of those workers were to come back to one of us or Tim or somebody in the elections office and say, hey, I just saw somebody come in and drop off, what looked to be a very large stack of mail-in ballots. We absolutely would have gone back in and reviewed the security feed. And if that did indeed happen, we would track the individual who did that. That's a crime under the election code. And at that point, that would have been referred to the district attorney for his discretion on whether or not to act.
But you know what I'm saying? So if you had 1,900 ballots that came out and 272 people that deposited those, how do you know which people their vote should be counted?
Well,
Like, do you have to go through and have all of them revote?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll give you one more example of that. About a block from my house is a United States Postal Box. And there's no cameras on it. There's nothing monitoring it. I've never actually seen anybody use it. But it's sitting there, right? There's no monitoring up. There's no staff there. There's no anybody there. And so, to that end, again, in my mind, I'd rather have if we're going to deploy boxes, I'd rather have boxes in areas where we are able to, if we receive a complaint, right? Because there's thousands of votes cast in Lawrence County in any given election. And unless there is, a legitimate complaint, we're not going back in and reviewing everything. So with that regard, I don't particularly see a major issue with those boxes in those magisterial district offices.
But somebody checks that camera like every single day.
Nobody checks the camera unless we receive a complaint.
So if nobody complains about the drop box out or inside the building, or in the
The
vestibule.
sheriff monitors that. They have a staff that monitors that.
And the one up top, the sheriff monitors.
Right, okay, so does Sheriff Polero, does he every morning go through that video camera?
No, unless we receive.
So unless there's a complaint, you don't know.
Unless someone sees something happening, but that's the way it is in everywhere. I mean,
For anything.
No, but do you know what I'm saying? It's just, well, I
Well,
don't know.
what's to hold somebody from dropping a willful ballots into a mailbox for that?
Exactly.
And for that,
It's not, but-
and for that reason, one of the reasons that we deployed them where we did, was because if we were to receive any indication whatsoever that something's happening at those Dropbox locations, we do have, at least at the time, I don't know if we still have, it's been 2 years, but we do have that feed to be able to go back and check. One of the reasons that, whenever I go to the Patriot events or whenever I go to party events, or, I'm sure when Loretta goes to the Lawrence County Action, or, we welcome. If anybody, if someone wants to go stand, if the Republican Party wants to send a watcher, a Democratic Party wants to send a watcher to one of those magisterial offices and sit there for the entire day, by all means, power to you. If you want to have people inside the elections offices or inside the polling places as monitors, again, make sure we're aware of that.
Right.
And make sure that that's done correctly, but we're 100% on board with that. Our goal is 1,000% transparency here.
Absolutely.
My thing is when Lawrence and Mercer and Beaver and, when the smaller counties allow the drop boxes, it's a tough fight for Philadelphia and Allegheny, where we know there's fraud. I mean, people that.
Well, that's,
Well,
it's proven, right, let's make sure it's proven, because I know many cases were brought to the courts throughout all states during the last election. There's been none of them. So we have to really make sure that we're speaking facts.
Well,
We have to be speaking facts.
And I'll say this, this is a debate I think that's going to continue.
Yes.
This is not going to end.
We have another meeting of you.
At the Lawrence County Board of Elections. But seriously, thank you for coming. Thank you all.
And so what's the deal with the mail-in ballots being open before, is that for next month's
vote or what?
I mean, we'll take that into consideration. I'm honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not inclined to change that process.
Right.
Just number one, for efficiency's sake. Number two, my understanding is if, I'll give you an example. If a voter, were to pass away, as an example, before we go to open those, but it happens. It happens.
Sure.
There are things that we're just not gonna be able to pick up on. With regards to opening them at 8, the law very clearly states, well, maybe not very clearly, but I have both a Republican and a Democratic attorney telling me that we can do it, that we're allowed to open them, we're allowed to put them through the machine, we're just not allowed to hit the button. That's,
Nobody looks at the results.
nobody looks at the
No,
results, and if they do, we're
So
throwing
what
them in
happens,
jail.
so what happens if somebody, let's just, for instance, say my husband gets a mail-in ballot, or someone votes for him with a mail-in, I mean, they would, my husband, but anyway. And then he goes and they say he's already voted,
Mhm.
and then he gets a provisional. Which one is counted?
Well, that's, we would go and research, because we keep all the envelopes. And so I would go to see, okay, here's your ballot. So you already voted. We're gonna count this ballot.
But if he says he didn't, and someone voted in his.
Well, then there's an investigation.
Right.
That's for sure.
So then does his provisional get counted?
No, we would definitely hold off on both of those until we find out.
But how
what's
would you
going on.
know which one if you've already opened them?
Well, that's what I mean. It would have to be investigated. I can't.
Every
But you've
envelope
already
that comes
run
in
it
has
through
a
the machine.
barcode, that they have a barcode. That's why the envelopes are kept. The barcode is there to show that there was a mail-in ballot that was sent out and then returned with a barcode that is unique to, like, his name.
Right,
And the law states
but if you
that,
separated the mail-in ballot from the envelope, if you already separated the ballot from the envelope.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying it's already counted.
Yes,
That we'd have to do an
That's
investigation.
my
I'd have to
point.
get the
Here's,
solicitor.
I will say, the other thing with that specifically, and this is more of a perception thing than it is a reality thing. When, in 2020, for instance, other counties did the way we did it, but some other counties did not start counting those or not start putting them through machine until 8 p.m.
they didn't separate them either.
I thought it was interesting.
yes.
With
So
that,
they did not separate.
no, I'm not talking about, with that, the Republicans who vote predominantly through in-person precincts, those results came in first, right? And those were reported first. When the Democratic ballots, and Democrats are much more predisposed to vote through mail-in voting than Republicans are, it's just I think it's like 3-1.
That is really.
And Lawrence might be 5-1.
Yes.
When those came in, while it's not the case, at least here especially, that opens the door for people that otherwise candidly don't know what they're talking about to go and cry voter fraud, because it looks like, or could be perceived as, even though it's not the case, that we know how many Republican votes, generally speaking, are in, and now we're going to go fabricate Democratic votes to counter those. That's not the case. However, I guarantee you, if we were to do that in Lawrence County, we would have people here through the wazoo saying, well, you got the Republican votes in, you knew how many Democratic votes there needed to be.
Right.
That's going to create perception issues unto its own right. Now, in cases what you're talking about, where you have a legitimate issue, where something's counted, a guy comes and says, hey, I didn't actually vote in that. To my knowledge, that's never happened.
It didn't happen here, but it did happen in other counties.
Oh, it's never happened here.
Right.
I'm-
It doesn't mean it won't happen this time.
In the event that it does happen, number one, rest assured there'll be an investigation done, right? And that might result in a policy change, right? And number two, because it's never happened, I've never experienced it happening here, and I'm not aware of significant circumstances in other counties where it's happened a god-awful amount of times, right? Let's say that the results of that is impacted by 1 or 2 votes. That is going to have a negligible impact on any election. But again, at that point, if we start to see a problem with that, you look at the policy and you may adapt the policy.
And I mean, I'm happy because I really do think, and I do toot your horn a lot, I really do think we have one of the most secure county elections.
We do.
In the
We
state.
are very secure.
Our
Yes.
checks and balances are there, but that's against stop boxes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
Anything else?
That's it.
I will need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Prison board of
Sure.
town.
Yes.
The paper tomorrow is gonna be 16 pages long. It's prison board.
I know.
Lynn,
I'm gonna go bring
I'm gonna
this
take
sandwich.
you.
I'll be back.
Thank you.
Well, I was,
Oh, they left?
morning this
Thank you, ladies.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Did that pass?
Up there and see if I can.
He was just presented to motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I left, and I.